the best way to do so, again, is listening, understanding your audience, and helping them.
All right, Natalia, thank you so much for being here. You are guest number 9 on To Market. And I'm so excited that you agreed to join me on the show. For one, I've been really trying to increase my presence on LinkedIn. And it feels like every really good post that I see on there has you tagged on it in some way. So especially when the topic's related to personal branding. So you've you're kind of this celebrity on LinkedIn, at least you are to me. So it's really cool that I'm able to sit down and chat with you now. So first, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Scott, and thank you so much for this very interesting and beautiful description. I wasn't aware of that, but now as you said it, it's interesting.
Right. Very good. And I think one of the things that really caught my eye with your LinkedIn profile is that in your headline, you describe yourself as an edutainer, which when I worked at Walt Disney World a long time ago, they called us merchantainers. So I always like these kind of hybrid titles that involve entertainment. But now that I work in education, edutainer really kind of jumps off the page at me. So can you tell us a little bit about what an edutainer is and kind of the path that you took to get where you are today?
Sure. So an edutainer is a mix between an educator and an entertainer. So for me, a person that is an edutainer needs to have knowledge or expertise. Of course, that's the first step. But that person also needs to possess humor, honesty, needs to be able to be vulnerable, speak from the experience, and needs to be a cheerleader or a motivator for his students. And with students, I don't mean a classroom, or it doesn't need to be a business school or anything. Anybody who is a coach, a speaker, a trainer, anybody who shares knowledge in that way, for me, is an edutainer. And the way how I got there is quite a long story. I'll cut it short. I studied social science, so I have a Master of Arts, and then I did my Doctor of Philosophy. And I realized I really, really like sharing my knowledge, and it needs to get out of my system because alternatively I just turn gaga. So I need to get out of that. And I realized that I'm very good with words, which is funny enough because English is not my mother tongue, but apparently it's also very good in English. And I have a very expressive face, which I most probably developed during my time as a competitive athlete. I used to be a dancer for over 10 years. So when you dance, you need to express all of the feelings in your face, with your eyes, with your mouth, with your body, with everything. Everything with you dances. And during my sabbatical that I had, so after I finished my studies, I went to the UAE. I worked for government. Then I worked for private economy. Then I worked in a startup, and I realized none of this makes me happy. What does happy actually mean? What is success? All of that. Went on a sabbatical, and during that sabbatical, I created a list with all of the things that I wanted to do, and I failed myself up to the lifestyle, the life, and the career that I have right now. And getting all of these skills and experiences and somehow merging them, I figured out that the role of the edutainer perfectly fits or suits it.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think that I'm always interested in talking to people who have these paths that aren't that customary. So when you go through all the the academic rigor of trying to earn these terminal degrees and then totally overhaul your career and do something different, that's so interesting for me. And what's also interesting is that and part of that headline is that you're the number one edutainer in the Middle East. So you mentioned going to UAE to work for the government. And most of the people that I come across in my circles on Twitter and LinkedIn in the personal branding space are based in the US. And I feel like because in product branding, there are such differences across global markets that you must experience something similar with personal branding. So is it different when you're trying to teach personal branding to someone in Dubai than it is in the United States or someone in Germany?
Yes, a very good question it is, because personal branding for me means, or the other way around, the targets of personal branding are very diverse. It's not that people approach me with the same problem or challenge. Some people, they say, Natalia, I have this job that I like, but I know that I can do more or achieve more, and I'm not willing to write CVs. I think by polishing the way how I am, by getting my brand to the next level, I could achieve that. Yes, absolutely. Personal branding can help you there. Some other people, they say that they just want to improve their online presence. They want to learn how to create great content, how to build a community, and through that, get their brand out there. Some people, they think that the way how they speak and the way how they move when they present, that's not really helping their brand. So these are different targets. So what I do in the very beginning is I analyze and understand what is the goal that you want to achieve. And then in a second step, I have a look at the cultural background, because I come from Germany. My parents come from Poland, so I always grew up in two different cultures, and the Arabic, culture here is also different. You cannot say the Arabic culture because you have Syria, you have Lebanon, you have the UAE, you have Jordan, and all of these ones are different. But let's assume for a second that the Arab culture exists. People here are wired in a different way. The social rules are different, and the expectations from individuals are also different. So it definitely makes sense to sit down and say, okay, this is what you want to achieve. Okay, how does your society function? What does it expect you to do? And how can we find the loopholes to then attack? So just to give you an example, one of my clients is in Germany. And during our last session, which was all about public relations, I told him that he needs to go out there and deliver speeches and sit on panel discussions and share his expertise and all of that. And I said, that's what people do in the UAE. And he said, well, in Germany, people don't really like that. That's what you do when you're rather a keynote speaker. But if you're not really a keynote speaker, if you're just a coach, you wouldn't do that. And actually, they want you to pay money for that. So that's something that I learned in that area. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, you answered it very well. And I think one thing that you illuminated for me is that the personal branding umbrella is huge, right? So we're talking about not just your online presence, but also how you present yourself in face-to-face settings. And it seems like, at least over the last year, we're kind of biased toward thinking this is all about what you're doing online. So how are you presenting on LinkedIn? So I'm glad you brought that up, that it also has to do with, and we often bring up personal branding when people are looking for jobs. And a major component of that obviously takes place face to face. So I'm happy that you brought that element into it. And now I'm going to focus on the online part after I said how important face to face is.
Sure.
But one thing that I find with personal branding, even through me personally trying to put myself out there a little bit with some podcasts and videos and things like that, and trying to post more regularly on LinkedIn, is it can be quite overwhelming because there are so many platforms, and I feel like I have to write a blog here and post an article on LinkedIn, and then make some LinkedIn videos and some YouTube videos and some short videos for Instagram and Twitter, and come up with snappy tweets for Twitter. And I haven't even gotten into Snapchat yet, but there are just so many platforms out there that I think if someone approaches this the problem of, hey, I need to work on my personal brand, just figuring out where to start can be pretty daunting. And like you said, it depends on that person's goals. But I work with a lot of students, MBAs and undergraduates, and they're just trying to kind of polish their online image. So what do you recommend? How do you start? Do you have to get out there and kind of be active on all these different channels?
As long as you're not Gary Vaynerchuk or Huda Beauty, you don't. And to be very honest, these people or these brands, I know that they have 6 or even more people working on their social media channels. So relax, slow down. That's the first thing. I would ask myself, or the other way around. First of all, who is my target audience? And then the second question would be, where do they spend time on which social media channels? And with target audience, a lot of the students that I work with are confused because they say, I don't offer any services. I don't have a book or anything that I'm selling. And I say, okay, so what are you looking for right now? Why are you building your brand? And in the majority of cases, these people say, I just want to find a job, or I want to find my dream job. So I say, okay, so your audience will be your potential employer. Now tell me, is it an employer who's based in the US? If so, in which state? In which industry? How big is your company? The person that you would speak to most probably would work in HR. Okay, is it a woman? Is it a gentleman? Okay, so we're getting closer and closer and closer. And the next thing is, if you already know your avatar, you've designed that avatar, then ask yourself, where would he or she spend time on? If we're just talking about that specific person working in HR, the likeliness that you will find her on Snapchat is relatively low, because we all know that Snapchat is rather a medium that people use for targeting teenagers and a little bit older. So if you are a brand that sells, let's say, sneakers or something like some fancy stuff, yes, be on Snapchat. But a great platform to always start from is, number one, LinkedIn, because it's the biggest professional platform out there. And once you mastered this one and you understood it, okay, then open your second one or focus on the second one, which could be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, depending on, again, what you want to achieve. If you're a graphic designer, maybe Pinterest would make sense. I mean, if you are going into the microblogging area or something which is about news and trends, you need to go to Twitter. It depends on what you want to do, who your target audience is, and do it step by step. And I do believe that having 1 to 3 channels is more than enough. I have 5 at the moment, and it's impossible to master 5. I'm struggling with 3. So for me, it's time within the next month to outsource a few of them to an expert.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of feels like approaching it like you're trying to generate leads for a sales role. If you're selling your personal brand, where are those leads going to be? Where would you go to find prospective employers? So I think that's a really thoughtful and healthy approach to figuring out at least which platform to start with. And that's what I've been recommending to students is starting with LinkedIn, because all of your prospective employers are going to be there in some fashion. They may not be tuned into the activity feed, but potentially you could still reach out to them through InMail and some of the other features that are available. And with LinkedIn, where I discovered you online, what's your sense? Because it seems like LinkedIn has kind of exploded in terms of people creating content there, and now they introduced video pretty recently. So it's really growing up in terms of the activity feed. But I still don't have a good sense for who's actually tuning into that part of it. So if I'm trying to connect with chief marketing officers or sales managers, I don't know how many of them that have LinkedIn profiles are actually paying attention to their LinkedIn feed. Is that growing a lot as well, in your opinion, or what does it look like?
Can you rephrase the question, to be very honest?
Sure. Yeah, I guess if I'm targeting sales managers and 100 people that I want to reach are on LinkedIn, I don't know if 2 of them are going to see the content that's being produced, or if 90 of them are kind of paying attention to the actual feed. Because sometimes I feel like people create their LinkedIn profile and then they just have it there and they don't do anything with it. So it's kind of their one-to-many communication, but they're not using it like Twitter, like we are, right? Going in every day and kind of looking at what our connections are talking about. Do you know if people are actually paying attention to that, to the feeds?
I do believe so. I mean, what you need to keep in mind is that I think on LinkedIn, you can reach up to 30,000 connections. And in the end, your connections are also your followers. And once you hit these 30,000, people can only follow you. So I would, again, keep in mind that your followers, your connections are your potential leads or customers, or somebody you want to put in that bubble or into that box, and you're creating content for these kind of people. So you will see that they like it or they engage with it through their comments and their likes, and you will see their reaction. If there's no reaction coming from them, then maybe your content is not relevant, or you're posting at the wrong time, or maybe you connected with the wrong people. What you could also do is always work with hashtags and then look for a certain hashtag and see who posts something in that area. But yeah, I think this would answer the question related to the newsfeed.
Right. Good. And it will be interesting to see where it goes, because for me, just kind of observing all these different platforms, it feels like one that has a lot of growth. And I imagine from the LinkedIn perspective, there are a lot of, and they're already using many of them, but a lot of monetization opportunities for them as well, because of the fine targeting they can do in B2B, for example. So it'll be cool to see how that all develops.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I'm always thinking about with building a personal brand is, so maybe the first step is just kind of polishing your existing image online, but then the natural next step, and you've talked about this some already, is developing content. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to write a blog, or I want to write some articles, or even just writing thoughtful posts or making short videos. It's pretty hard to do, at least at first. So do you have any tips for how to write effective content, or how to record effective content for someone who's never really done it before?
Mm-hmm. First of all, don't create content just for the sake of creating content. I believe in an approach that solves the problems of your target audience. So listen to the challenges of these people and address their problems or challenges with your content. So what I realized is I typed in personal branding into Google, or into, how is it called? Answer the Public, I think, answerthepublic.com. And I wanted to understand what people ask Google. And I realized that people ask the question, what is personal branding? They don't ask how to elevate your personal branding game to the next level, the 20 benefits of personal branding. They still ask, what is personal branding? So I realized, okay, I need to speak a lot about that and about small aspects and educate people on this topic first. So all of my content is around solving these problems, educating people on what I do. And the best way to do so, again, is listening, understanding your audience, and helping them. What is also important is that whenever you have a thought or an idea for a great piece of content, write it down. And it could be the classic, how do you call them, sticky notes or post-its. But what I regularly do is I just use the app Notes in my smartphone, and I just dictate into it. So I have at the moment 50 potential blog posts or status updates that are in there. And what also helps is either sitting down once per week for 1 hour, let's say, and drafting all of that content, or sitting there every day for, let's say, 15 minutes and getting it out there. So catch those moments, catch these thoughts, because when you say, when it's there and then you say, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to remember, no, it's
Right.
gone. It's gone. When the muse talks to you, grab her by the dress or by the shoe or whatever it is, and write it
Right.
down. So that's important. And the last thing I would like to mention is live an interesting life. Then you're going to have something to say. If you're just sitting on the couch or in front of your laptop and play computer games, what kind of value can you add to other people? How do you want to inspire others when you live a boring, lame life? So go out there, explore, and share your stories, share your lessons learned, share your experiences, plus solve problems. I think that's the perfect content strategy.
Right, that's incredible advice, because I even for my own research, I keep an idea file, and if I didn't do that, then I'd be trying to chase ideas and remember what I was thinking of 3 months ago, and it would just be impossible. So I love the idea of just kind of keeping things in your notes app, or jotting things down on post-it notes so that you can refer back to it, because what you'll end up having is, even if you're not writing any content this week, you might have 4 new ideas that have some legs or some potential. So I think that's really very simple but very powerful advice to give someone who's trying to do this. And I'm struggling to. It's funny because I always think I have so much content because I'm a marketing professor, but even I'm like struggling to figure out what I should be writing about. And you mentioned kind of looking at Google and seeing what people are looking for, and I've found that Google Keywords Helper, which is free if you have a free Google AdWords account, is really nice because you type in personal branding, and it will tell you, there are 1 to 10 million people a month searching for what is personal branding, and that's such a cool tool, not just for ideas on writing stories, but also for how to write headlines for your stories, right? And how to develop keywords for your stories. So it's just kind of another tool that people can keep in mind. Awesome. So we've talked, and one thing I've become cognizant of, this is only my 9th episode, but one of my guests mentioned at the very end of our interview, he said, Daniel Kotlar, he said, we've spent 30 minutes talking about my successes, and I just want everyone to be aware that I had a lot of failures before I got to where I am today. So don't give up if you're experiencing your own personal failures. So since you're in personal branding and you've become an authority in this area, I wanted to ask you if you ever had failures with your personal brand and maybe how those shaped you into who you are today and the message that you project today.
I totally believe in if you don't screw it up once per week, you're not growing, you're not learning. So I regularly make mistakes. If you want to call them failures, yeah, why not? For me, it's a big dramatic word. But I think the biggest failure that I had, especially in the beginning, is I was not clear on who I am, what I want to do, what I stand for. So I experimented. I did everything a tiny little bit, which was great because this was the only way how to learn it. But I also documented everything and shared that with the world in my blog, on my Instagram, which on the one side inspired people and said, wow, look, she's doing everything. So one day I see her jumping out of an airplane, and then she is modeling underwater, and then she's writing new blog posts, and she starts to teach people on LinkedIn. But in the end, I confused the hell out of everybody because nobody knew who I am and what I actually do. So it would have been smarter if I would have worked with a coach and defined who I am, what I want to do first, and then got that out to the public. But then on the other side, by making this mistake, I now know that it exists. And before I let my clients nowadays out there and publish everything, we sit down, we do a little bit of profile sharpening. Who are you? What are your values? What is your trademark? What are the feelings you want to trigger in people when they engage with you? What is the target of your personal brand in the first year, in the next 5 years? And all of these. And once you're set or once you're aligned, then we can go into storytelling. Then we can go into social media content strategy, into building a network, into public relations, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that it really ties into that bigger message of maybe focus over volume. Because one thing, and I think I've even fallen prey to this in January as I tried to really ramp up, was that maybe I was producing more content than I should have, instead of producing the right content. So that's and some of it involves experimentation, right? You're trying to find your voice, but once you're at that point when you have a clearly defined target market that you're going after, that's when it makes more sense, and the volume will come, right? If it's your wheelhouse, your area of expertise. But there are certainly some trade-offs there because you can, even though it seems fun, right, to work on social media, you can burn out pretty easily. And then you get frustrated with trying to produce so much. And then you just kind of stop paying attention to everything, and all your efforts have gone for nothing. So that's really cool. And especially for you, I guess every failure that you've had in personal branding will inform how you teach other people. So they're, like you said, they're just mistakes, and they're probably all really valuable as long as you pick up on them. So that's
Exactly.
great. And I think this is my final question. So I always try to ask a question about entrepreneurship because I teach a lot of MBA students, and many of them, if they're not already entrepreneurs, they have aspirations to start their own business someday. And you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I feel like personal branding must work a little bit differently for these people because they're the face of a new company. Often they're working in a startup situation. and they're trying to kind of brand their new product or their new service, but then on the side, or maybe at the, simultaneously, they're trying to brand themselves. So do you have any tips that are specific to people running their own business?
The challenge that I see when I compare people who work on their personal brand, who work in corporate and who want to stay in corporate and just want to get their brand to the next level, is they have less time, but they have more cash. So they can outsource more things like, can you just connect with people on LinkedIn with me? Can you just write my content? Can you write my book? So that's definitely a plus point. And, on the other side, those entrepreneurs, they don't have the money, but they have the time. So they have more time to think about who they are and what they want to do. And they need to be more resourceful, and they grow in a different way. So I would say make time to figure out who you are and what is important to you. So yes, of course, work on your services, but your services will be better in your brands and product when you have fixed, or you have, let's say, understood yourself first. It's always easier to manage everything on the outside when you are more zen and when you are more clear. And in the majority of cases, the people that I know who go into entrepreneurship after working in corporate life, their services or their products are around a certain belief system, around a certain lifestyle. So this product or service is kind of exactly how they are. It's very close to them. It's a clothing line. It's a product that they've created out of a necessity. So again, you have a bigger impact on your product and services when you are working on it with your own thing compared to being in corporate. So make sure that maybe you get a mentor, you get a coach, you have those people around you who think in a similar way. Get feedback, work on it, work on yourself, and the rest will flow. And don't focus too much on the service and everything. Start with yourself.
That's cool. And that really resonates with me, because when I teach just a short unit on personal branding to some of my MBA students, I think maybe this is from Tom Rath's book, Strengths-Based Leadership, but I start with self-awareness, right? The path is kind of, I think it's self-awareness, awareness of others. So then you start to be able to identify strengths in other people, and then self-management, right? So it's more than just awareness. You're able to manage your strengths, and then management of others. So I think that, starting with that self-awareness, it's hard, right? And you have to go through this process of really figuring out what your passions are. And that might not completely align with where you are in life. And there's this kind of self-discovery process, which can be exhilarating, but also frustrating. But I like that you talk about starting there, and also just the interlinking of yourself with your product, because this is the product or service that you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into, right? So those are not completely disconnected things that you should be working on independently. So very good. So we just had about 30 minutes together, but I think it was packed with information. And if someone's looking for a primer on personal branding, I believe and I hope that this is going to be just tremendously useful for them. But also there's a whole world of content out there on personal branding, and I think that you're producing some of the best. So could you tell people how they can follow you?
Sure. They can either find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Natalia Wiechowski, and if you prefer to learn a little bit more about Dubai or how the private Natalia is, then you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Think Natalia. And what else? I have a blog. So if you're interested in reading any kind of articles that are related to personal branding, public speaking, or general thoughts on life, thinknatalia.com.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to post links to everything in the show notes so that it's easy for everyone to access. So I just want to thank you again for being here. Again, I know my show's new, but I've been getting awesome guests. So just your willingness to help me out and to appear on the show means a lot to me. So thank you.
You're most welcome. I had heaps of fun, and I wish you all the best. But I think the starting point is fantastic. So there's only place or room to grow.
Great. Thank you. We'll catch up again soon. Thanks.
Speak soon. Bye.
Okay. Thanks.